Can you read this? Odds are you can't, because it's ancient cuneiform. It's a dead language. But try this one. Do you know what this says? This is ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, so you can be forgiven if not. Some of you might know the next one, though. If so, please keep it to yourselves, because the next slide is going to give us all a chance to redeem ourselves. The next slide, I'm willing to bet, every one of you will get right, regardless of your age, your gender, your years of education, your linguistic background, your ethnicity, your cultural background. Ready? What does this say? Yes, it says, I'm happy. It says, I'm very, very happy doing whatever it is I'm doing. And you knew it the moment you saw it, didn't you? Why? You knew it because we're hardwired to read facial expressions, to read one another's minds, to understand what is going on inside of another person. And why is that? Because we're built for connections. But you and I know that connections can be too hard to come by, and misunderstandings are all too easy. That's my grandma and my grandpa. Many years ago, when I first was licensed as a psychologist, my grandmother had a severe stroke. That stroke broke connections in her brain, and it broke connections in her life. That stroke impaired her ability to speak, and it paralyzed the muscles of one half of her body. It paralyzed the muscles in one half of her face. My grandma could not speak or write or even smile the way that she used to. And for several years before she died, I watched her frustration trying to communicate her experience of living to my grandfather, to my dad, to her daughter, to healthcare providers, and even to me. I was her firstborn grandchild, and I was a clinical psychologist, and I couldn't understand my grandma. Over the years, practicing as a psychologist, I would watch my patients also struggle to share their internal experiences with me. They hadn't had strokes, but I was asking them to fill out questionnaires to help me get a sense of how depressed or anxious or irritable or tired or dizzy or how much difficulty focusing or how much pain they experienced. And usually they had this type of format, a line with some bars and some numbers to try to share with me what it was like to be them, so that I could take good measurements and track their progress and their outcomes in psychological services like psychotherapy. And they would struggle. And they would say, I don't know, doc, maybe it's a 2, maybe it's 3, who can tell? And they would take 20 minutes to fill out a 5-minute questionnaire because they were writing stuff in the margins trying to help me understand beyond what this would provide them. One of my patients said to me, Doc, I don't feel in 5-point gradations. He had a point. As a business person with my own private practice, occasionally I would have to order materials or supplies, and I would place an online order, and then usually I would get a request with something like this after the case, asking me to share my experience with the transaction. And I would struggle because usually I had some mixed feelings. I was satisfied with the delivery, it arrived on time. I was tickled with the service personnel, very, very friendly, very helpful. But ultimately, I was disappointed with the product. And which of those was I supposed to use this to represent? I mean, this is like asking me how many rocks in a bag did my experience weigh? 3, 4, 5? And how could I account for my entire experience with this? It was very difficult. Of course, you might say, well, you had the opportunity to write it out, right? They probably gave you an opportunity to add some elaboration. Sure, but language and text are problematic. Even if you know the language the person is using to communicate with you, you know that text messages and emails and other forms of written communication can often be misinterpreted, sometimes very badly, and that we can write one thing and mean another. By the way, those slides I showed you earlier before the little boy, they all had something to say. They all said, "I'm happy." Well, thank goodness for emoji, right? Emoji have come along. And emoji are the world's fastest growing language. And they do help because they add context to written communications. But there's a problem with emoji as well. Emoji were never designed to represent our feelings. Emoji are designed to be fun. And there's no science behind them. There's not even any consistency behind them. The emoji that you send from your Apple device doesn't look the same when it appears on your Android device. And research from others, as well as from myself and my colleagues, has demonstrated very clearly that emoji, even the facial expression emoji, are not consistently interpreted even within one device or operating system. There's still a lot of noise getting in the way of good communications and good connections. So, witnessing all of these difficulties, I thought there's got to be a better way. And together with some friends and colleagues, using a little bit of background in neuroscience and personality psychology and emotion science and computer science, we developed something a bit better. This is Morphe. Morphe looks like an emoji, but it isn't. Morphe is different. We've designed a suite of tools that allow you to pick exactly what feeling you feel based on the facial expression, and then to do something critically important, to dial in the intensity. Because intensity matters. Because feeling a little bit frightened is not the same as feeling terrified. And feeling a little annoyed is not the same as feeling enraged. Because our different feelings and our different intensities give rise to different emotions, different motivations, and different behaviors. And that's critically important. So we've designed a suite of tools that capture a variety of different human experiences, different feelings. We have one that represents sadness. And you notice the numbers? The numbers occur in the background. They occur at the database level. They don't occur on the face while you're selecting what you feel and how much you feel it. We never ask people to use a number to try to represent what they feel. We just offer them a mirror that allows them to say, that's not enough, that's too much, that's just right. We call that the Goldilocks moment. And you know it when you see it because you're hardwired that way. We have others as well. How about that one? That's my favorite. Ew. I love that one. And one more. Why have we done this? Because we're built for connections. And because being disconnected hurts. It's been said that all the muscles of our bodies are meant to move us, but the muscles of our faces move others. We're built for connections. Understanding is critical for empathy. Empathy is the foundation for compassion and ultimately for love. And I dare you to argue with me that it's more important than ever for us to connect and empathize and understand one another as frequently and as thoroughly as possible. My grandmother did not live to see this invention, but I'd like to think that if she were here with us today and had the opportunity to consider how a little change like this could make a big difference for a kid with autism trying to learn to read and understand other people's emotions more effectively, or other stroke victims just trying to express themselves, or businesses trying to understand the needs of their customers, patients trying to communicate effectively with their doctors, or just kids communicating with one another to feel a bit less lonely and maybe not suicidal. That even if her face wouldn't allow her to smile, she'd show us this. Thank you.